Welcome to the Hoops and U's podcast, where we delve into professional hardwood happenings along with graduating gridiron gossip. I'm your host, Dayton Brown.
And I am also your host, Matthew McFatridge. We are here to give you news and opinions on what's going on in the NBA and college football. We'd like to welcome you to our very first episode. Dayton, I don't know about you, but I'm super excited to get this show on the road. We've been talking about it for a while now, and it's finally happening.
Man, this is amazing. I'm so glad because for those of you that don't know, Matthew and I both write at hootatdish.com, where myself and Tyler Raymond, we host the Who Dat Dish podcast, and Matthew's a contributor on the site as well, and he's been a guest on the show a couple of times, and we were just like, man, we should host our own podcast, talking about NBA and college football, because, that's a couple of mediums that we don't have a different platform to go on. And so we're like, might as well just make our own. So this is going to be a podcast about NBA and college football, which are arguably two of the most exciting sports in all the sports world.
100% agree. Agree.
Yeah. A lot's going on too. So I'm super excited, man.
Yeah,
we've been talking about this for a while.
Oh yeah. It's finally good. Like I said, it's good to finally see the product coming and it's finally happening and all that. What we're going to do is we're going to be recording this each week and releasing it on Friday of each week as well. So that gives us enough time for the weekend college football games and all that.
Yep.
We're definitely going to try to jump on that. And, if any other scheduling things come up, we're going to try to have some specials coming on YouTube as well and iTunes. I know YouTube right now is going to be our main platform that we release on until we get further along in the development of stuff. And then we're going to release it on iTunes as well. So stay tuned for that. But I guess I'll go ahead and jump into the first segment if you want. This will be kind of one that we kind of have has a mainstay at the beginning of our show. It's kind of what's trending. It's going to be taking a look at the week's top trending topics on Twitter as when it comes to sports. And we're going to kind of discuss them. This one we kind of, since it's our first show, we're kind of going back a little bit further in time as well, kind of looking at the whole NBA offseason because there's a lot of stuff going on. But most recently, the big news this week, Dayton, is Kyrie Irving being traded to Boston for Jay Crowder, Ante Zizic, if that's how you pronounce his name, and the Nets 2018 first-round pick, which will probably be top 5 pick. So what are your thoughts on that, man? How do you feel? Who do you think won the trade? What are your initial reactions and all that?
So first of all, this is the craziest thing I think about the trade is that it was so ground shifting, and it was just it had such an impact on NBA Twitter and the NBA world when it happened. But we all knew Kyrie Irving was going to be traded. Like, imagine if this trade happened without Kyrie requesting a trade. Like if we didn't know that Kyrie wanted out of Cleveland and that was like locked behind doors, and then this trade pops up, it would have ended all of us. But we knew it, and it was still crazy. We knew Kyrie Irving was going to go to a different team, most likely. But it's also crazy that they traded them to their rivals, to the Celtics.
That was the most shocking for me as well. I agree. Go ahead. But
and I you know what? I've struggled with this, but I'm going to stay on my original opinion on this, my original reaction. I do think the Cavaliers won this trade. Not only, if they would have swapped Kyrie and IT, obviously the Celtics would have won that trade. Kyrie is a better point guard. He's proven more than Isaiah Thomas has. Thomas did have the better year a season ago, but Kyrie Irving has had the better career, and he's performed better in the playoffs overall. He's had more experience. He obviously has a championship ring. He has better handles, better offensive game. He's slightly better on defense, even though both of them aren't, anything spectacular. Yeah. But the fact of the matter is, this was the craziest part to me. Danny Ainge was holding on to that Nets 2018 first rounder like it was his child, and he was not even really looking to trade it at all. And now that he knows that Kyrie Irving was on the market, I was wondering if that totally changed. Like, he needed to go after Kyrie Irving, because him dealing that Nets first rounder totally shocked me. And my thought is, as soon as he heard Kyrie, or maybe even before Kyrie requested a trade, he was looking into trying to get Kyrie Irving, because him throwing in that 2018 first rounder just makes me think he was going to go after Irving no matter what it took. Really.
Right. I definitely think that he was holding on to it for a special player. I don't know if Kyrie was necessarily in the plans, but when the opportunity presented itself, I think he had to go for it. But
I was maybe thinking like he would do it for a Jimmy Butler, or obviously a Paul George. Mm-hmm. But I think the Cavs won. Not only, Isaiah Thomas is a hell of a point guard. It's not like they're Granted that they are technically downgrading, but not a very far downgrade for them. Jay Crowder is a really, really good defender, and he's actually a pretty nice two-way player. He can make some threes, and he's pretty rugged down low, which is what the Cavaliers need. They obviously always need shooting. Zizic hasn't played in the NBA yet, but I've heard a lot of good things about him. He did really good in the EuroLeague. And obviously that first rounder, you can do anything with that first rounder because most likely it's going to be a top 5, at worst top 10 pick, depending on how good or bad the Nets do. So with Cleveland, they can either trade that for another piece, which a lot of people are saying they might pair it up with Kevin Love to get somebody like DeMarcus Cousins, which I don't think would, like, if you're going to pair it up, why trade Tristan Thompson and his contract for DeMarcus Cousins? Like, keep Kevin Love, like that starting 5 of IT, J.R. Smith, LeBron James, Kevin Love, and DeMarcus Cousins is a really, really good starting lineup as opposed to having Tristan Thompson come off the bench, having like Channing for starting power forward and starting DeMarcus Cousins.
Right.
But I also have a feeling that they traded for that pick because they are kind of thinking about LeBron leaving, and so they just have that just in case. But overall, I think that the Cavaliers won that trade.
Oh, I mean, I definitely agree. I feel like they did. I'm a big fan of Isaiah Thomas. Some people that I know personally think that he's not a great on defense. So he's definitely a one-way point guard when it comes to that. He's not going to give you anything. But he also does have that hip injury, that lingering hip injury, held him out. I mean, the last couple games of that series last year against Cleveland. Jay Crowder, like you said, is great, a really, really good defender. That instantly gives them an upgrade at that, that 3 position, because I'm bigger on LeBron will, when he's on the court, play, around, but Jay Crowder definitely matches up with, the standard small forward. He can guard Kevin Durant. He can guard, Jimmy Butler. He can guard really well. Like you said, Zizic hasn't played in the NBA, but he is, from what everybody says, he's really good. I haven't personally watched any film on him. I think that was just to add really some depth. You had a big guy like him. And like you said, you already talked about the 2018 first-round pick from the Nets. Them trading it, I think, is probably what's going to happen. I think, if they want to keep LeBron, they got to show that that they're willing to contend. And I don't think their team right now, that while they definitely did, I don't know they definitely necessarily upgraded as far as record goes. I think they're going to have about the same record, probably still get the 1 or 2 seed in the East. Boston didn't get a raw into this deal. I mean, they get Kyrie Irving, they got Gordon Hayward this offseason, got Al Horford still at center. They're definitely still a good team. It's just going to be a matter of, can they fix that bench depth? Because we saw last year that their bench was not as good as Cleveland's, and that's not to say Cleveland's bench was great last year, because you saw Darren Williams last year, and he, you and me were talking a lot about him. But
arguably, Cleveland had one of the worst benches in NBA Finals history. Honestly,
I want to say that might have even been worse than the bench that was on Cleveland in 2006 when LeBron carried the team to the finals against the Spurs before they got swept. I think that bench was actually a little bit better.
That whole roster
Daniel Gibson.
Boobie Gibson and whatnot.
But all that. But I definitely think the Cavs won the trade. Again, Isaiah Thomas's health is going to be an issue, and I think he's only signed for 1 more year, if I remember correctly, whereas Kyrie is on the roster for 2 more years. So Boston can have him for 2 years, see if the experiment works for 2 years, and if not, they can maybe trade him by the trade deadline next season. So
that's true. Try to get something out of him. Do you think so? So I liked how you brought in like Gordon Hayward and what else Boston has done this offseason. They've lost 4 of their 5 starters from a season ago, but I think overall they improved their starting lineup. Kyrie is an upgrade over IT, even no matter how big of an upgrade it is. It's an upgrade. Trading away Avery Bradley, they had to do that to get Gordon Hayward, and I didn't like that move because I think Avery Bradley is one of the most underrated
I totally agree. That was kind of bad, but go ahead.
But I'm glad that they got Marcus Morris out of it, because I think that he is a slight upgrade over Amir Johnson for their starting power forward position. They're going to rely heavily on Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. Jaylen Brown is going into his 2nd year. He looked good a season ago. Didn't impress me too much, but he looked pretty good. And Jason Tatum hasn't played a game in the NBA. Gordon Hayward is going to be their 3. I personally, throughout this entire summer, I think Gordon Hayward has been overrated. I think that he's a fantastic player. I think that he's a top 20 player in the NBA. But I think with all of the fiasco going on in the offseason, people kind of lost sight on who he really is. I think that they overinflated how good he is defensively. because now they're saying, oh, Hayward gives them, an even better option at the small forward to guard LeBron and Kevin Durant in games. And like Gordon Hayward is a good defender, but I mean, he's not a lockdown guy by any means. He needs help. And the Utah Jazz, under that system, they were such a good team defensive.
Right. He had that back line behind him. They had Rudy Gobert. And,
exactly. Yeah. He had Rudy Gobert. He had Trevor Booker for a lot of his career down in Utah. Quinn Snyder is a great defensive-minded coach. So it's going to be different. Speaking of coaches, he is going to be with Brad Stevens, so that'll help. But I think overall Boston improved, but their bench is looking pretty barren, honestly.
Yeah, they did trade a lot to get not only Gordon Hayward, but also they gave up 3 players and a draft pick to get Kyrie. So, I mean, definitely going to be interesting. Like you said, I still think Boston will compete for a top 3 spot in the East next year, but I don't think that this gets them over the hump and gets them to the NBA Finals if they had to play through Cleveland. I don't see that happening again. Either, so.
Do you think I'll ask you this before we move on. Do you think Kyrie is happy that he got traded to Boston? Because I know that he wanted to have his own team, but this might be Gordon Hayward's team. I don't know if this is Kyrie's team off the bat.
I still think Kyrie is like you said, I think Gordon Hayward is a top 20, 25 player in the league as far as offensive skill-wise goes. He's all right on defense. But Kyrie is definitely a top 10 player in this league, I feel like. I feel like Kyrie, again, you saw Kyrie kind of when he was the face of the franchise in Cleveland, he was young, albeit, but he didn't have the kind of the staff around him to help. I think Boston is going to be putting young pieces around. They got, like you said, Jason Tatum, who I personally love. I think he's probably one of the best shooters to come out of the draft this past year. So that'll be really interesting. But I do think Kyrie, it's going to take a little bit for him to get under the flow, and we'll see how Brad Stevens works him in. But I think in the end he'll be all right. I don't think he'll have too much trouble, in the end. I think in the end it will be his team number 1 and Gordon Hayward number 2. It's kind of close, though.
It's just crazy. Boston is relying on so many guys who haven't played at all a minute of basketball for that team. Kyrie, Gordon Hayward, Marcus Morris, Jason Tatum, and Jaylen Brown played too many minutes a season ago. So it's going to be interesting how they form it. And I bet you they're a team that probably starts out slow but then picks it up down the road.
More than likely, yeah. I mean, last year, let's be honest, before we move on, last year they weren't supposed to be that good that quick. Boston was not there. Boston was rebuilding. Last year may have just been a fluke. I'm not going to say it was a complete fluke. Isaiah Thomas turned it on and just came on. Nobody expected him to be that good, for this team at all. Nobody expected him to carry the team, but he definitely carried a bulk of that team, to the NBA Finals, to that number 1 seed in the East, which we'll talk about seeding. I'll talk about seeding at the end of the show for the playoffs. But yeah, Dayton, what you got next on the docket for us?
I think that attests to how good of a coach Brad Stevens is, honestly, to be able to lead that team to be that good. And speaking of coaches, our final 2 segments for the What's Trending, Hugh Freeze, former head football coach at Ole Miss, University of Mississippi. He obviously resigned about a month and a half ago from his position as head football coach. Reports are coming out now that he contacted escorting services 12 separate times with a university dispensed cell phone, when the report first came out about Hugh Freeze, people, I remember this very vividly on Twitter. People were like, Hugh Freeze isn't going to go anywhere. Oh, he'll be fine. They'll be able to fight this. And then like that very next day he resigned, and people are like, okay, something's going on. And I know some people had a problem with Ole Miss. This might be a very small majority, but for letting him go due to like morality reasons. Like he didn't really break any major rules, but obviously the morality reason of him going was crazy. What do you think about everything? It's kind of a lot to take in. We don't know everything that's gone on right now, but what are your initial thoughts so far?
Well, like you said, when it first came out, it was a report of, he made a phone call to an escort service and he resigned. And I was like, all right, so he called an escort service. Now, again, just based on what I know about Hugh Freeze, I'm not an Ole Miss fan at all. I'm looking at it completely from the outside. I still don't know a whole lot about the story in depth. I think we're still learning a lot about it. But I think he was, he's big into his faith. He calls himself a Christian. He says he's a big man of God. He's big on that. Mm-hmm. And when that first came out, it was like, oh, okay, so that's a big shot at his character. But then whenever he resigned, I was like, okay, so it must be true. So he's definitely dealing with family issues and everything like that on the side, and besides losing his job. So I hate it for the
Right.
man. But then when this report came out that he called it 12 separate times, and I believe it came on like recruiting trips is when he mostly did it. He would be out recruiting. He would probably, be out with his coaching staff. He'd go back to the hotel room, and then he would make these phone calls. That's kind of scary. I mean, like,
Right.
it's a little bit different than, I don't know if you know much about the Louisville basketball situation
Yep.
with Rick
Yep.
Pitino and all that.
Yeah.
That kind of same thing with like having escorts with the basketball
Yeah.
players and all that, and them, the coaching staff paying for these escorts and all that.
Right.
That's kind of like scary. I don't know if Hugh Freeze just did it for himself or who's doing it for the players he was recruiting, the high school players, or if he did it for his actual players. I feel like there's a lot more of the story that's still going to come out over the next little bit, over the next couple of years, maybe even with this lawsuit with Houston Nutt. That's the main. He's the main reason I think a lot of this came out with that lawsuit that he's having about defamation of character.
Right.
Because Ole Miss has been, like you said, been standing pat by Hugh Freeze.
Yeah.
Last year, some stuff came out, and they were like, "Oh, we're standing pat with them. We're standing pat," even though I think it was all these players talking about getting paid to come to Ole Miss, and that was a big thing with that offensive lineman that they had. I can't think of his name right now. Went to Miami.
Yeah. Who got drafted by the Dolphins?
Right.
Yeah. Oh, what's his name?
It's gonna bother me,
Here,
but
let me look it up real quick.
all right, yeah. But with that, people said, "Oh, we're gonna stand by Hugh Freeze. We're gonna stand by Hugh Freeze." And Robert Kendici and all this different stuff. All this trouble was going on around Hugh Freeze, but they were like, "Oh, we still trust him. We still trust him to lead this franchise." And then, like you said, one offseason later, they're like, he was pretty much told, "You either are getting fired or you have to resign." And he resigned. I mean, just kind of, it was kind of a forced resignation again. So it's not really like, "Oh, I'm stepping down." It's a forced resignation, but it's crazy, man. Like, I don't know. It's crazy how fast things can turn on you, especially in the college football world. I mean, we always hear about it's a win now. NFL's the same way. It's a win now league. You have to win. I'm a big Tennessee fan, and Butch Jones has been there for 5 years. We haven't got over the hump of 9 wins, and some Tennessee fans are calling for him to be fired. Now, I kind of want him to stick around for at least a couple more years, see what he can do. But I mean, again, like Ole Miss reached new heights under Hugh Freeze, and they beat Alabama 2 years in a row with Hugh Freeze. And just to think, a few years later now, he's stepped down, and that football team is in shambles. Like, I don't know what's going to happen. I think players might just transfer. There's violations apparently coming with a bunch of different stuff, not just this apparently, but like I said, all the pay scandal thing that was going on. So I don't know, man. It's a lot to take in.
Stuff catches up with you, and the NCAA is stingy. They're very strict on everything that they do. Laramie Tunsil was the name.
Laramie Tunsil, that's it. Yeah.
So he was like supposed to go number 1 at some point in the draft, and then he ended up falling to like out of the top. I think he went like 13th to the Dolphins because of that video that came out at the worst time.
Yeah.
And yeah, Hugh Freeze has always been interesting to me, mainly because he's one of the only like football coaches in the NFL or college that never played beyond a high school level, and yet he's a really good coach. He knows his stuff. I always found that interesting with him. And comparing this, what's going on right now, obviously, like I said, we don't know everything that's gone down. But comparing this to the Louisville situation that happened, it was a couple of years ago, that's a really good comparison. I'm glad you brought that up. The only big difference between that is Louisville, it was a bunch of assistant coaches doing that I think what they did was a little bit more extreme. But with the Ole Miss situation now, it was the head coach doing it all. Like, Rick Pitino didn't have his hand in any of it. He got a lot of heat because he didn't know what was going on. And that when you're a head coach, you need to know what's going on all the time. And sometimes if you say you don't know what's going on, I mean, you could be lying, because head coaches are supposed to know what's going on every single point on their team at their university.
100%.
Here, it's Hugh Freeze actually doing the so-called dirty work with it, actually contacting the services 12 separate times. I mean, that's crazy. And the worst part is it was a university that Ole Miss gave him the cell phone. Like, that's the cell phone that they gave him. Like, he didn't do it on his personal cell phone. I mean, for whatever reason he did it. Obviously, I'm guessing it's for recruitment of players to come to Ole Miss. But I mean, I don't think we 100% know now. It could have been just for him. And if that's the case, it still looks bad because it is the phone that the university gave him. Like, if he's contacting escort services on his own personal cell phone, I mean, I don't think a lot of obviously people would care, but I don't think that they would, call for him to be resigned. But I'm guessing he did it for the players to recruit them, which is obviously illegal. Mm-hmm. Yep. And he obviously did it on a university bought cell phone. So no matter how you go about it, that's a really bad look, and that shouldn't be happening. I think that's where really the line is drawn, using a property from Ole Miss to, contact. And I'm pretty, it's not legal. Well, I guess escort, I guess it depends, but a lot of that stuff isn't even, legal in some states.
Right. A lot of states don't, it is illegal in a lot of states, but I don't know. It's like I said, there's a lot more about the story coming, and I think we'll definitely have chances to talk about it later on in future episodes for sure, because as more comes out, it's just going to, it's going to get bigger and bigger for that, not only for him, but for that university.
Yeah, more reports will definitely come out, more info, and as soon as we get that, we'll talk about it for sure. Better news about a coach. This is our final topic for the first segment. Dabo Swinney, head coach for the Clemson Tigers, got a 8-year, $54 million extension after this is the offseason after Clemson won the national championship over Alabama in an instant classic bowl game, which is fantastic. Swinney has brought Clemson national championship. He's won them a lot of bowl games. Clemson has dominated. And the thing with Dabo Swinney, when he right now with this extension, he is now the second highest paid coach in the NCAA, football coach, obviously behind Nick Saban of Alabama. The thing with Dabo Swinney, correct me if I'm wrong, because you might know more into this than I do, but from what I've seen, Dabo Swinney is a fantastic recruiter, fantastic coach. He's one of those rare coaches that is better at coaching his guys than he is at recruiting, as opposed to, I think Nick Saban is a lot better recruiter than he is a coach, but he's fantastic at both of them. But Nick Saban is able to get all these fantastic guys. Dabo Swinney, granted, he gets, Deshaun Watson, Mike Williams, all these guys, but I think he brings out the best in them. I think he does a little bit better than Nick Saban and really anybody else in college football. So I love to see him being rewarded like that.
I definitely agree. I mean, to think you make the college football playoff final 2 years in a row.
Yes.
You lose a close game to Alabama the first time, and then you win, like you said, an instant classic. That game is one of the best of all time. I think last year's bowl games where there were so many great classics, but this was
the
easily.
Rose Bowl was great. Yeah.
Dude, Rose Bowl is probably the greatest bowl game of all time that I've ever seen with my eyes. This here was probably was definitely in the top. It was great. But yeah, like you said, it's great to see him get rewarded because he is a really, really good coach and he cares a lot about his players. He's not just putting them out there. He cares about them, and he's a really great man. I think I've met him once as I was up in Columbia, South Carolina, and he was there doing something in Inwood territory. That's where the University of South Carolina is. But he was there. I met him, just shook his hand, really. But he was, like I said, he seems like he's a really, really good coach. He is actually a really good recruiter. I don't know what it is, but Clemson has definitely turned the tide with recruiting, and they've definitely under him his first couple of years, even before he got there, it was a term known as Clemsoning, where you would lose the games you weren't supposed to lose. And then now it's like you look. I mean, they lost to Pitt last year, but I mean, they still won the national title. They won the big game when it mattered the most.
Exactly.
Like you said, I mean, being the second highest paid coach, I think he definitely deserves it. It was a well-deserved contract. 8-year deal. That's crazy. I think there's a huge buyout now. Anybody wants to sign him, there's like a huge buyout they have to do. I think it might be in excess of like $7 or $8 million or something like that. It might even be more. Again, I haven't read all the details of that extension, but it's big news for Clemson, big news for Dabo Swinney. He can go buy himself a new house or something like that if he wants.
Right.
But yeah, so Dabo Swinney, as we talked about, he is a college football coach. We're going to go ahead and dive into our next segment, which is college football preview. There's actually some games happening this Saturday, Dayton, tomorrow. Yes. It's no big team, no big name teams or anything like that. A lot of the big action starts some games next Thursday, but the big action, next Saturday, Alabama, Florida State. The one I'm most excited for, Tennessee opens on Monday, Labor Day, at the Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. It'll be the second game. Of course, Alabama, Florida State play their game there. That'd be the first ever game played in that stadium. But what are you looking forward to this season? What do you kind of expect to happen? What are you looking forward to?
College football is, like I said, when we first started this show, college football is one of the most, arguably the most exciting sport platform anywhere that you can find. Mainly because it is just these very hungry college kids playing their hearts out week in and week out. There's nothing off the table. In NFL, you have 32 teams. A lot of their offensive schemes are pretty much exactly the same. They need a pocket passing quarterback, which is great. It's fun to see. In college football, you can get what you name it. You can get it. You can get spread offense. You can get a wing T offense, Georgia Tech likes to run. You could get a bruising running back and a really bad quarterback, but have that team be fantastic. We've seen that with like LSU and in Alabama. In the NFL, that doesn't fly. You need to have a really good quarterback.
Right.
In college, you don't need like a franchise type quarterback. You don't even have to have that great of a receiving core. Very important to have a good offensive line to obviously make that all happen, but it's not a necessity. You can have really good type A player and a really bad type B player, and that'll fly in college football, which won't in the NFL. So I'm just excited to see. I'm just excited for college football to be back because it's fun to watch. I am very interested to see what happens in the Big Ten. I think that's going to be the biggest storyline. The Big Ten is the best conference in college football right now, at least in my opinion. You have Ohio State, you have Penn State, you have Wisconsin, you have Michigan. Michigan is ranked 11th now, and Michigan could end up winning according to a lot of people, they could be favorites to win the national championship. But right now they're ranked 11th. That's how kind of stacked it is right now. And obviously the SEC is always going to be strong, but it's been dominated by Alabama right now. They are the only SEC team in the top 10.
Right. Yeah.
And what surprised me most with this, I'm just looking at the top 25 AP people. Washington State, which I live up in Washington State. I don't live at the university. Obviously, it's a little bit more northeast than I am. But usually been a very poor football team for a long time. But the fact that they're ranked in the top 25 in the preseason surprises me. And I'm interested to see how they do. But obviously, I think University of Washington, who is ranked 8th right now, is a lot better. But keep your eyes on the Big Ten. Keep your eyes on the Big 12 as well, because one of those teams in the Big 12 could sneak their way into the playoffs.
Right.
And we'll get to a little bit more about that as far as who we're going to pick for a Final Four. But I don't see it being Oklahoma. I think that Oklahoma always comes in to a season fairly overrated. And now that Bob Stoops is gone, it's going to be interesting to see how they do. But I think the Big Ten is the best conference. So obviously that's going to be where most of the best football is. But the Big 12 is the most intriguing to me. I'm most interested to see what comes out of the Big 12. What about you? What you looking forward to anything really?
Yeah, like I said, I'm a big Tennessee fan. I'm not going to go biased and say they're going to run the table or anything like that. I mean, right. I have no idea what Tennessee's going to do this year. I'm not even going to talk about them. But like you said, I think the Big Ten is right now the best conference. I hate to say it. I'm a big SEC guy. I think the Big Ten is the best conference. ACC is close. ACC and SC is really tied. Really, really close. Yeah. I guess we'll kind of see. We'll see the top. We'll see the top of the SEC and Alabama play the top of the SEC or ACC, Florida State, and that first Saturday. It's number 1 versus number 3. That's going to be insanely good. But I expect madness this year. I like it, like you said. I expect the Big Ten to be really, really good. Washington, both Washington teams are really good. USC looks like they're going to could potentially be dominant. Yeah. Sam Darnold, Heisman candidate. Jake Browning's coming back to Washington. Michigan, the big question with them, I think, is their quarterback play. I don't know. Jim Harbaugh is expert at coaching quarterbacks. He can coach up, pretty much anybody. I think he could probably coach me up, and I could win them a couple games under Jim Harbaugh. He's just he's a great offensive minded quarterback. He used to be a quarterback. He was played in the NFL for a couple of years. He just knows what he's doing.
Yep.
But yeah, like you said, Big Ten, I potentially could see them getting 2 teams in the playoff. We'll talk about, like you said, more about that in a little bit. But I'm definitely excited to see how Washington bounces back. If Florida State can take over, Clemson lost Deshaun Watson. I'm interested to see if Florida State can take the reins of the ACC back. Or are there any sleepers that are going to be popping out, anything like that? And that's kind of what I'll talk about next is who do you kind of have as a biggest surprise team that might potentially shock some people? Who's a sleeper that everybody's kind of not really thinking big on right now or talking a lot about?
You know what's funny? Last year, my answer to this question before last season started for NCAA football, I had Tennessee as my sleeper team, which is funny. Now, this was before I even knew who you were. And
Right.
now the fact that we're doing it and you're a Tennessee fan, I just find that funny. But
Yeah.
yeah, last year I said Tennessee. This year I'm gonna go with a team that's ranked in the top 10, but I think that they're going to do a whole lot better than what a lot of people think. And that's Oklahoma State. I feel like Oklahoma State is going to battle their way through the Big 12, which is not saying much because really their only competition is Oklahoma, maybe TCU. Other than that, not a whole lot of competition
Right.
down there.
Now.
Their first game is home against Tulsa. Which is on that opening Thursday. Or sorry, it's actually on the Friday. I think Oklahoma State is actually going to be a playoff team. I really do.
Wow.
I think that they're going to make their way out of the Big 12, and I think that they're going to look. Arguably, they have the best wide receiver core in all of college football. They're going to need to have strong offensive line play for a lot of their plays to work. I think that's been their Achilles heel the past couple of years. They're a very high-powered offense. If their offensive line isn't protecting them well enough, their offense just kind of falls apart.
Right.
And it's going to be interesting to see how their defense develops. But then again, they're going up against the Big 12. I mean, there's not a whole lot of competition there. It's Oklahoma State, and that's it. I mean, I don't see anybody else kind of rivaling them at all down there. I think that they're in the it might be the easiest Power 5 conference out there. I mean, it probably obviously is. I mean, ACC, SEC, Big 10, Pac-12 are all really strong. And then you got the Big 12, and it's kind of like the stepbrother that is just confused, doesn't know what's going on. And I feel like that's how the Big 12 has been for a while now.
Yeah.
I can't remember. I don't think they've never had a team in the top four called, like, for the 3 or 4 years it's been around, right? They haven't had a team in the top four.
They have not, to my knowledge. I don't think they've been ranked in the top four at all during that span. So
which is crazy. I think Oklahoma State breaks that spell this year. I don't know how well they do in the playoffs. Obviously, depends on who they go up against. But that's my sleeper team. Who do you got?
Oh man, I wrote a whole list of teams, and I was kind of looking over. I was like, man, I don't know who to pick. Like you said, Washington State is obviously in the top 25. I think they could potentially do really well. They might be able to upset Washington, USC. I'm not really sure about that. Mississippi State looks like they could potentially be, that second or third best team in the SEC West.
Great coaching staff.
Coaching staff. I mean, Nick Fitzgerald is a great quarterback. He could potentially be a Heisman candidate if he leads them to 9-10 wins, something like that. I don't expect them to get past Alabama, but the team that I'm most high on right now is South Florida, USF. Kind of under the radar, not a Power 5 team, anything like that. But they brought in Charlie Strong from Texas.
Yes.
He got fired from Texas. He couldn't really win the games down in Texas, but he recruited so well at Texas, and I think he's going to bring that same thing to South Florida. He's right there near Miami. That's a hotbed for recruiting. And Quentin Flowers, their quarterback, I actually like him a little bit better than Lamar Jackson as far as the diversity goes. I think Lamar Jackson has the flash. He can obviously run and make the big plays, and he makes the long throws. But I feel like as far as poise goes in the pocket, I think Quentin Flowers for USF, South Florida, is just a little bit better. I feel like he's a little bit more poised. He might not get any attention from NFL scouts as far as a higher draft pick, but I definitely think that he could potentially lead them. I think they went 10-2 last year, and then I think they won the bowl game. I could potentially see them, making a run to the top. Maybe a New Year's Six bowl, maybe be in the highest ranked non-Power 5 conference. Team, and eventually, maybe playing in the Orange Bowl against somebody, or the Fiesta Bowl, or Cotton Bowl, or whatever the New Year's Six bowls are this year. There's too many of them to name. I definitely think South Florida. I think Charlie Strong is gonna, do good things there. It's a matter of, can the offense? That was his kind of thing at Texas. Is, can the offense actually perform consistently? I hope he has a good offensive coordinator. I haven't looked into the staff, but just looking at USF, how they performed last year, and then now they have Charlie Strong. I'm excited for it. I think great things could happen.
Speaking of USF, another sleeper team I wanted to mention, who's outside of the top 25, University of Oregon, who signed Willie Taggart. I think I'm saying his name right.
Right.
Willie Taggart, who was the former coach at South Florida,
Right.
Who Charlie Strong subsequently replaced. He is the guy at. So again, I live up in Washington State, but Oregon has been the dominating college in college football for the past 10+ years. And so obviously I hear a lot about Oregon, and I see a lot of their stuff. Their recruiting class has improved tenfold with Willie Taggart at the helm. And he's also a fantastic coach, so it's going to be interesting to see how it translates onto the field. But I can't believe Oregon is that far outside of the top 25. They only got 21 votes or 21 points or
right. 20, yeah, you're right.
Whatever.
Points, whatever. Yeah.
And which is pretty crazy. But the Pac-12 is tough. But I mean, they're going to play USC. They're going to play UCLA most likely. If they can make it out and make it to the Pac-12 championship game, they're going to be in a really good bowl game, and we're going to be able to see some really good guys. Royce Freeman, watch out for him. He is entering his senior season. He's most likely, I wouldn't say most likely, it's actually going to be pretty tough, but he could end up finishing as Oregon's all-time leading rusher, which is saying a lot because you've had guys like LaMichael James, Kenyon Barner, DeAnthony Thomas come out of Oregon as fantastic running backs who are pretty electrifying. Royce just gets it done. His nickname is Rolls Royce for a reason. He rolls over guys, so it's gonna be interesting to see. But yeah, I think Oregon might be a sleeper team that might be a little bit biased. I wouldn't consider myself like a huge Oregon Ducks fan, but I obviously root for them because they're nearby. But yeah, I've been hearing a lot from Willie Taggart to see what he's gonna do.
Yeah.
Who's gonna be the biggest disappointing team in your eyes?
Man, again, this was a hard one for me. I think Auburn. Auburn, they signed Jarrett Stidham, the JUCO transfer. He was at Baylor before. And everybody's saying they're praising him to be like the next savior. But I remember not too long ago when everybody was saying Jeremy Johnson was going to lead Auburn to a national championship and be a Heisman favorite, and you saw what happened there. I don't necessarily think that Jarrett Stidham, he might be the answer. I don't know, but he's only played in like 4 or 5 games, and he was at Baylor, like you said, in the Big 12 against a bunch of defenses. That defense is an option. It's an option if you want to play defense in the Big 12 or not.
Right.
There's not very many good defensive teams in the Big 12. Oklahoma's defense has been hit or miss even. Oklahoma's probably the most consistent defense I can think of. TCU used to have a dominant defense, but since they joined that conference, it's just defense isn't even a thought anymore, it seems like. But I'm not really sold on Auburn yet. Like I said, the more physical defense of the SEC, there's more speed in the SEC. I feel like, I don't know. I just don't think that, I don't think he's going to be necessarily the one to lead them to a national championship. He might win them 8 games, 9 games. I see Auburn going there, but I don't see them competing with Alabama. I think the SEC is still Alabama's to lose. Even if Alabama loses this first game against Florida State, they're still probably going to win the SEC, probably still going to win the national championship, or at least be in contention for it. So, but what about you, man? Who do you have as the biggest disappointing team this year?
I think it's funny that you brought up Auburn because they were also one of my disappointing teams. Colin Cowherd, I was listening to a show the other day. He had Joel Klatt on, and he said something about every year Auburn he compared it to, say, he had some type of analogy. But pretty much every year somebody says, oh, watch out for Auburn. Auburn's going to be really good. But usually they're always disappointing.
Right.
And I don't know what it is because they actually recruit fairly well. I don't know if it's a coaching situation. They've gone through so many coaches. I don't know what it is about them, but I do see them falling out. And as much as I'd like to see Miami, as much as I'd like to see them win some games, I see them being outside of the top 25 by week 5. And their opening game against Bethune-Cookman is probably going to be their easiest win of the season. Other than that, they have a fairly tough schedule. Obviously, ACC is a really tough conference. I think Oklahoma is probably the highest up team that I think is not going to do nearly as good as people think, and that's because it's the same thing with Auburn. Every single year, people are like, watch out for Oklahoma, watch out for Auburn, and they usually always underperform. And I think that Florida State, I don't see them making the I love Derwin James. I really do.
Yeah.
I don't know if I see them in the top 4. It's going to be tough.
Yeah, that's a good point. Go ahead, man. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, you're good. It's all about how dominant the ACC really is. But yeah, I don't see Florida State getting past Clemson. I don't. I think Clemson is too good of a team. Florida State, obviously on paper, I could see Florida State being a better team on paper for sure. But when it comes down in the trenches, coach against coach, Clemson has the upper hand in a lot of areas.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
like I said, that's going to be interesting to see how they do in the ACC. I mean,
yeah,
Clemson did lose Deshaun Watson, but their defense is still as good as ever. They lost Ben Boulware, their starting middle linebacker, and all that. He was probably the face of that defense, but I definitely think that that's going to be an interesting race in the ACC.
yeah.
Another team that I'm not too high on, I think USC being ranked number 4 is a little bit too high.
Okay.
I like I said, I think they're getting there. I know earlier in the last part where the big surprise team, I mentioned them. They could potentially be there. I don't think they deserve to be number 4 to start the season.
Right.
T. Martin is a really good offensive coordinator. Of course, he went to the University of Tennessee, so I'm kind of high on him. I'm kind of follow him, but I'm not sure that Clay Helton necessarily is ready to lead this team to a national championship. Now they did have that big game against Penn State in the bowl. That fourth quarter for them was insane. How they came back to win that game.
Yeah.
Like easily one of the best bowl games of all time, but most thrilling at least. And I don't know. I don't know that USC can get there. It'll be interesting to see how they handle Washington, how they can handle UCLA, if they can run the table or at least go 11-1 in the Pac-12. Then yeah, they definitely deserve to be there. But I think right now they're just rated too highly. That's just my feeling on them. But again, I'm on the East Coast, Dayton, you're on the West Coast. So I mean, how do you feel about USC? You might have heard a little bit more about them. So
I kind of like USC at 4. I'm very, very, very high up on Sam Darnold. I might be more high up on him than the average. I mean, people are very into him right now, obviously, but I think I'm even more high up on him. He's the perfect form. Like, if you want to construct a perfect quarterback, physically, mentally, and just the way he throws, it's Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold is at least one of the prototypes. I think, obviously, like Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, all those other guys, they're prototypes. They're like the perfect quarterback. Sam Darnold falls into that category. So as long as Sam Darnold, and I think that he's in a great system, plays a pro style offense. That's why he's considered to be the number 1 overall pick if he plays well, because he's already in an NFL type offense, which is really impressive to do really well in college football. It's starting to not be as rare. I mean, if you look like 5, 6, 10 years ago, it was a lot more beneficial to not run a pro style offense.
Right.
But now that a lot of teams are realizing, hey, this is the best way to keep our players healthy and to get them ready for the next level of the NFL, pro style offenses are becoming a lot more popular. But it's still impressive to see the way Darnold works. I think he has a strong arm. I do think, though, their foe from the Rose Bowl, Penn State, I think they are ranked just a little bit too high. I definitely think they're a top 10 team. I don't think that they're like 6th. I would more put them at like 8th. I'd probably honestly swap them with Washington, and I'd move Oklahoma back and put literally any other team in.
Yeah.
I think Oklahoma's a top 10 team. I could be wrong at the end of the day, but this is just repetition. Oklahoma's not going to do that well this season. It happens every single year.
Yeah.
We just need to get over it. Their head coach is gone. Bob Stoops is gone. He was like their last. I mean, Baker Mayfield, fantastic quarterback. He's going to be Heisman candidate. But I mean, you need a lot more than that. And USC has better coaching than they have in a long time. I think Clay Helton is good, and he has room to improve. Like you said, he's a very young head football coach in terms of games played compared to other college football head coaches. But USC also they always have electrifying defensive backs. We saw it last year with Adoree Jackson, who ended up being a first-round pick. And Sam Darnold is going to be a Heisman candidate, but it's always tough for a pocket passing quarterback to win the Heisman. You have to be really, really good. Usually, like Lamar Jackson, who won it this season ago, he was a dual threat quarterback. He got a lot of rushing touchdowns, passed the ball well, obviously. But usually you have to be a little bit more than just a pocket passing quarterback to win. But Sam Darnold, I think, is going in as a favorite to win the Heisman Trophy this year.
Yeah, sure.
But I'm pretty high up on USC, I think, more than most people. And then I'm a little bit lower on Penn State than I think most people are as well. But James Franklin, right? He's the head coach for Penn State.
Right.
I think, he's a fantastic coach, which is going to help Penn State out. But I don't know. I usually don't buy into how good of a team Penn State is until like halfway through the season. I'll be like, oh yeah, they're pretty good.
Yeah.
But it's like, they're in the Big Ten. It's tough, you
And
know.
that's the crazy thing about, right, like I said, I mean, we're both on different coasts of the U.S. and all this sort of stuff, and we both have different
Yeah,
outlooks and we both have different opinions. Like you
yeah.
said, you don't have Florida State in your top four. I personally do, but go ahead and give me
Okay.
your top four. Give me who you have as your national champion. Let's kind of get quick hits on those.
So it was actually pretty tough for me to form a top four, and mine is actually fairly simple. I have Alabama and Ohio State as the 1 and 2. I think how you see it right now in the AP poll is how it's probably going to end up finishing. Really high up on Urban Meyer and what he's doing with Ohio State, arguably the best recruiting class um, in the NCAA, right next to Alabama, who's obviously number one. I have Clemson as 3. Clemson is going to win the ACC, and they might even go undefeated. I actually wouldn't be surprised if they go undefeated. Their schedule isn't as tough as it has been in the past, and they've been able to overcome that. So I think that benefits them. And then I have Oklahoma State as my 4th team. That's like my sleeper team. If I had to pick like a more practical 4th team to go in, I would pick USC, just because, like I said, how much I love Sam Darnold. But before the season actually starts, that might even change, like within the next couple of days, or even like within the next week before the actual games go underway. But I'm probably going to stick with that top 4 throughout most of the way. I'm really interested to see who your top 4 is, because it's probably a lot different than mine.
Not really, actually. I mean,
Okay.
I like Alabama, Ohio State, like you said, 1 and 2. I think that's in the end going to be. I think Ohio State runs the table. I think Alabama 12-0, 11-1, doesn't matter.
Their only competition is LSU in the SEC.
Yeah, right now that's completely it, and that's they have a first time head coach, or not first time head coach, but a first year head coach, Ed Orgeron there. So we'll see how that goes. But I do see Alabama, Ohio State 11-1, 12-0, doesn't matter. They're both going to make it, I think.
Okay.
Florida State, obviously, I think they're going to win the ACC. I think they'll beat whoever they play in the ACC title game. North Carolina, Duke, who I don't even know. But it doesn't matter.
Right.
I think they have so much talent. I think or Francois, their quarterback, I think he's probably one of the best quarterbacks in the ACC.
Yeah.
I'm not sold on Clemson's quarterback situation. I don't know who they have behind.
That's
like
their
said,
biggest struggle.
They do have a good defense, a good offensive line, good wide receivers. I mean, they're probably wide receiver U of college football. They consistently produce wide receiver talent. And the 4th team I have in there is actually the one that you are not so high on, Penn State.
Okay.
Like I said, I have 2 Big Ten teams, and I got Ohio State and Penn State. They do play this season, so and last year you saw you had Ohio State lost to Penn State, and Ohio State still made the playoff over Penn State. Penn State, of course, then played that epic game at the Rose Bowl. It did upset a lot of people. There was a lot of people saying, well, because it seems like it's different every year. There's different criteria each year with the college football playoff. And that may be something we want to talk about later, is what do they look for? How is it different every year? Because it does seem like it changes a lot as far as what they look for and the different stuff. Each year is different, I feel like, and you're going to have a slightly different committee this year. I think I think it's like every 2 years they're switching out some of the pieces on that committee. But I like Penn State. I really like their quarterback. I like Saquon Barkley, their running back. I think he's a beast. I think he could potentially win the Heisman if Penn State does well enough. He's a top 10 Heisman candidate right now, at least in my books.
He's high up on the Heisman. Yeah. He's going to be impressive.
And Penn State, they just have that school. James Franklin is a heck of a coach. I personally don't really like him. He coached at Vanderbilt, of course, and he was there during Tennessee's low years, and he beat Tennessee twice. But he also just signed a big extension with Penn State. I think it was a 6-year extension, something like that. But he's a great coach. I'm a big fan of his. Actually, I don't like him really, but it's hard not to. He just brings the best out of his players. He's another one of those coaches like Dabo that just brings the best out of his players. He's a good recruiter, but maybe not great. But again, he brings out the best in those players and just knows what to do to make it really flow. So that's what I see. I think Alabama wins it all at the end of the year. I think right now they're just too good. I don't see anybody beating them unless they get there's this key injury. Alabama.
Yeah, I would say so too. Unless like I said, college football is super exciting. Anything can happen.
You're right.
Unless Clemson can pull it out again, or unless Urban Meyer really, really leads Ohio State, Alabama's. And I hate to say this because I love to see competitive playoff games. I think Alabama's going to run away with it. Bo Scarborough could end up being the Heisman. But first of all, let's go to that real quick before we move on to the NBA real quick. If you had to pick a Heisman Trophy winner today, who would it be?
Man, that's
or
tough.
like your prediction?
Like again, Bo Scarborough is really good. Jalen Hurts, Alabama's quarterback, is
Yeah.
really really good. He's a sophomore year. It's hard to think he was a redshirt freshman last year. It's crazy,
Yes,
and he played
that
so
was
well.
crazy. Yeah.
He definitely has to take a step forward as far as his passing maturation goes, but he could potentially win it. Right now, it's so hard to say. I'm really big on Sam Darnold, like you. I think he's a good talent. I don't know that he can lead USC to more than maybe 9 or 10 wins this year.
Yeah.
It's tough, man. It's tough to say. Man, I wasn't expecting this. I'll say Saquon Barkley, running back from Penn State. I think he's just gonna have a monster year. I think he's gonna lead Penn State to, double-digit wins in the regular season. I think he might lead them to beat Ohio State again, maybe beat
Yeah.
Michigan. I mean, I think Penn
That'd be
State could
impressive.
potentially win the Big Ten. But what about
Yeah.
you? Are you saying Darnold, or are you gonna?
Yeah, it depends on how good his team does, but I actually see Lamar Jackson winning it back to back Heisman trophies. I just, you know what? He's so electrifying. He's great. That's what Heisman voters look for at the end of the day. That's what gets people talking about you being a Heisman Trophy winner. Lamar Jackson has it. Usually they do come from, like Derrick Henry won it at Alabama. Vince
Right.
Young won it. Matt Leinart won it at Reggie Bush. They all won it at USC. It's usually these big name teams. Lamar Jackson played so well that he put Louisville on the map. Who, granted, Louisville, it's not like Louisville's a small time college or anything, but they're not one of the more talked about teams. I mean, they're ranked 16th after the year they had a season ago. They're still ranked 16th in the AP poll. I think that'll drive Lamar Jackson to play even better. If not, I do see either Saquon Barkley or Bo Scarborough winning it. If there's going to be any defensive player to win it, it's probably going to be Derwin James out of Florida State. But again, defensive player hasn't won it since Charles Woodson. Yeah, that was the last guy. Wow,
Yep,
that was a long time ago. Wow. I guess the last guy to actually be close to winning it was Manti Te'o.
And Jabril Peppers. Last year,
that's right,
with Michigan.
Yeah,
but he was a little bit. He's all-around
Yeah,
player. He wasn't just defense.
Yeah,
that was his main
exactly.
position, but he was kick returner, wide receiver, running back, everything. So
he only had one interception too, so I wouldn't chalk up. But still, great defensive guy. Let's move into the NBA. Let's do some quick 5-minute NBA talk, just because there's not too much going on right now.
Yeah.
The main thing that already happened, we already talked about with the Kyrie Irving trade. The schedule did come out. We know who's playing who on what date. Christmas Day slate came out. Craziest thing is that opening night is now, or it has been, Celtics at Cavs, which is going to be interesting because it's going to be Kyrie's return, his first game, which is wild to me. Just what are your general thoughts going into it? I mean, obviously we're both excited to see it, but what are you most excited to see overall, other than like the possibility of the Warriors winning it for the second year and the third time in 4 years? So what are you most excited for to see, really?
I just want to see how the West Coast plays out. I mean, honestly, we were talking about before the show about West Coast dominance. That's where all the big stars are. I mean, you look, Dayton, I want you to name me 3 stars in the East. Not name LeBron. Name me 3.
Not named LeBron.
Name me 3 star players in the Eastern Conference that are not named LeBron James.
Kyrie, Gordon Hayward, and John Wall.
Yep. All right. That's the 3 I had down too. So
that's about it.
It's hard to name. I mean, look at Toronto. Yeah. Toronto has obviously Lowry and DeRozan. Those are some good players and all that.
I wouldn't consider either of them stars though. Maybe.
I think they're stars, DeRozan, but not superstars. I don't think that you can build a team around them necessarily. But all the top players are out west. The West could, like I said, if we broke up the East and Western Conference, you would have a dominantly West. You would have 10, 12 teams out of the West and 4, 5, 6 teams out of the East. That's just how it would go based on record. I think Golden State does have a little bit more competition this year. Obviously, CP3 teamed up with Harden. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Who's going to control the ball? Paul George and Russell Westbrook up in OKC. Paul George might just be there for a year before he goes out west. But if they're competitive this year and they can re-sign Russ to that big long-term extension they're talking about, they might convince Paul George to stay. He could even do one of those 2-year deals with a 1-year option buyout for him maybe next year. So he could play there maybe just one more year before going to LA. I'm not sure. But I'm definitely interested to see how the West plays out. I mean, I'm an Orlando Magic fan. I don't expect us to do anything this year. We're not on any primetime TV games or anything like that.
Jonathan Simmons, though, man.
We do.
That was cool.
We're building. We're building. We're finally.
Yeah.
I feel like we're finally moving forward. We got a new GM. We got Frank Vogel, who I think is a really good, underrated NBA coach.
He's a good coach.
But I just think, it's gonna be kind of hard. But I know you're a Portland fan,
Yes.
Trailblazers fan, and again, Dame's another one of those players that's really good. How do you see them doing, and what are you kind of looking forward to as far as the overall season goes?
So this is obviously going to have some biasness in it because I am a Portland Trailblazers fan, but looking over, and I've done research into this, obviously this isn't just me saying this because I'm a Blazer fan. There's obviously some background to it. I see the Blazers doing a whole lot better than people are making it out to be, and that's because we played so well with Lillard, McCollum, and Nurkic starting, but we only saw it in about 10 – well, it was about like 15 games last season. So – you compare that to the 82 games they're about to play, or at least projected to play,
right?
For this upcoming season. And if they all stay healthy, which Dame and McCollum usually never have any injury problems, Nurkic was really the only one who did, but that was just, Portland has really bad luck with, centers getting hurt and whatnot. But if they all stay healthy, I could see Portland making the 6th or 5th seed in the West. And that's saying a lot, obviously, because there is a lot of talent out West. I'm most excited to see, I'm along the lines with you, seeing how the West plays out, but I'm mainly excited to see how good the Spurs perform, because I have a feeling that they're not going to do that well, and that could lend some leeway to other guys. Kawhi Leonard is a fantastic guy, but if you don't have a great point guard in this league, you're going to hurt a little bit,
right.
And it's going to be tough in the West especially. But, a lot of people are saying the Spurs are going to be like the 2nd or 3rd seed. I don't know if I see that, honestly. I mean, I don't know how healthy Tony Parker is going to be.
Yeah.
I don't know how good DeJounte Murray is.
They just brought back Manu Ginobili for 2 years, which, I mean, he's like an ageless wonder. He's definitely not as good as he was, but he still goes out there and makes some shots. And
he's an ageless wonder because he plays like 10 minutes per game now. His impact isn't his impact was felt in the playoffs, obviously, when he blocked James Harden and he had all those fantastic games. That was great. That's when he needs to show up. And I think Greg Popovich is obviously a fantastic coach. He coaches well enough for them to be well rested in the playoffs. But I'm with you. I'm excited to see how the West goes out. You got the Timberwolves. That's how stacked the West is. We haven't even talked about the Timberwolves yet. They have Jimmy Butler, Andrew Wiggins, Karl Anthony Towns. They signed Jeff Teague. Just fantastic team. And they didn't have to give up much for Jimmy Butler, and Oklahoma City didn't have to give up really anything for Paul George. Like Domantas Sabonis and Victor Oladipo. Are you kidding me? That's funny because the Magic could have had, if you look at it that way, the Magic could have traded for Paul George.
Don't remind me. That makes me so mad.
I'm sorry.
Same players that we traded to get Serge Ibaka got traded to get Paul George.
Who Serge Ibaka got traded for Terrence Ross.
Yeah,
is terrible. But I mean, but compared to you guys, maybe could have got Paul George. If A equals B, B equals C, then A equals C.
Yeah.
So so it's going to be interesting to see how the West does. Will this year finally convince? And I know you're going to delve into this later on, so I don't want to steal any of your fire, but will this year maybe kind of teeter Adam Silver to think about, abolishing the conferences? We'll see. I do think that there are 2 teams in the West that belong in the East, and that is the Thunder. I do think that geographically wise, I think Oklahoma City should be in the East.
Right.
And I do think the Pelicans also belong in the East.
I agree. Look at Memphis, too. Memphis is in Tennessee.
Memphis, too, over in Tennessee. So that's 3 teams in the East, but I don't think they're in the East because you can't really swap them out with any other teams over in the East. So it's whatever. But, it's going to be tough. The 4th through 10 seeds, or seeds in quotation marks because, 9 and 10 don't really have a seed, but those 4 through 10 spots are going to be tough in the West. They're going to be really, really, really tough. Because I see Rockets and the Warriors obviously finishing 1 and 2. I could see Oklahoma City finishing 3rd instead of San Antonio. You can swap them out however you want. But and then after that, it's going to be a toss-up between Minnesota and Portland and Denver, who got Paul Millsap. I mean, all 5 of the Northwest Division teams could make the playoffs. If the Jazz, I think the Jazz and the Blazers are the 2 that are kind of questionable. If both of them play fairly well, then they're going to make the playoffs, and all 5 of those teams are going to come into the playoffs, which would be pretty incredible to see. I don't think that's ever happened.
Yeah, I don't think
in
it has
division.
either. I don't think any division has ever had all their teams make the playoffs. I don't think that's
Yeah.
ever happened, but that'd be great if it did. But yeah,
Yeah.
so what do you kind of feel like prediction wise when it comes down to who's going to be in the finals? I mean, obviously you already said the East or the West. You already had your kind of listed your top three or top four.
Yeah.
What about the East? Do you have any like anybody coming out of there besides Cleveland? You think Boston can get over the hump? What do you have as your predictions for the end of the season?
I think the only team that, yeah, there are only two teams that are going to challenge the Cavs in the East. To me, it's Boston and Washington. And Washington actually might have a better. I think Washington is built all around just a little bit better than Boston is. I would take John Wall over Kyrie Irving. I would take Bradley Beal over Jaylen Brown. I don't know if I would take Otto Porter Jr. over Gordon Hayward, but it's pretty darn close.
Yeah.
I would take Markieff over his brother Marcus,
Mm-hmm.
and then obviously I'd take Al Horford over Marcin Gortat. But that says a lot. That the fact that the Wizards have a better starting lineup overall, if you take it piece by piece, than the Celtics, and they still have some depth. They have better depth than the Celtics. But at the end of the day, I think that LeBron runs the table in the East. I think Isaiah Thomas might even be a better fit with LeBron than Kyrie Irving. I think that that's something some people are missing out, because Kyrie Irving is definitely a dribble guy first, and he kind of needs the ball in his hands. Isaiah Thomas is a little bit of a better distributor than Kyrie Irving, and he also plays off the ball a lot better than Kyrie Irving does. So I think that's going to benefit LeBron if he needs to take control, which obviously he likes to do. Also reports that Amon Shumpert wants to be traded, which I think is really, really good for Cleveland. Because he's just kind of eating up a roster spot that they need to fill in with a guy who will actually make a considerable impact.
Yeah.
So I see it being, and I don't think anybody's going to challenge the Warriors out west, at least not. I mean, they're just way too good of a team.
Yeah, I agree.
Way too good.
I agree.
So I see it being Warriors, Cavs in the finals. Is that what you're seeing?
Yeah, that's exactly what I see. I mean, you pretty much broke it down exactly how I would. Golden State, they're going to have more competition. They're probably going to meet up with Houston in the finals, or in East or Western Conference Finals again.
Yeah.
Houston will definitely be improved. Like I said, it's going to be interesting to see who's going to be the primary ball handler in Houston. It's going to be CP3. It's going to be Harden. Harden last year down the stretch in those playoff games too, he didn't necessarily. I wouldn't say he choked, but he definitely didn't step up. He definitely kind of took a back seat, I think, in some of those situations. And CP3 never has had success in the playoffs. So it'll be interesting to see if now him with Harden, if they can come together. Obviously, that offense is explosive. I think Mike D'Antoni, he definitely knows what he's doing when it comes to offense. But I'm interested to see how that works together. But yeah, again, I see Golden State coming out of the West. I think Boston will take a little bit of a step back. I think Washington will potentially meet Cleveland in the Eastern Conference Finals. I think LeBron's just too much. Even if Isaiah Thomas is hurt, even if nobody else shows up for the Cavs, I think LeBron's just going to carry them. That's what he does in the postseason. Yeah. He's been to
James
seven straight finals? Is that right? 7 or 8?
It's been 7 straight. Yeah, okay. Ever since he went to Miami, every year since then, he has gone to the finals. Yeah, I saw a tweet. It said LeBron James. Somebody asked, I think it was Bleacher Report tweeted it. It said, could Cleveland's new duo make it to the finals? And then somebody quote tweeted it and said, LeBron plus 4 fans randomly picked from the crowd could make it to the finals. And it's true. LeBron is just magical, man. Like no matter who he's on. But I think a lot of that goes into what goes on behind the scenes, how LeBron is able to not only construct his team, but get them all on the same page and because you never hear bad things about LeBron. The reason Kyrie wanted out is because he wanted his own team. Apparently that Amon Shumpert report about him wanting to be traded was false. Cleveland was just shopping him, and somehow a report about him wanting to be traded came out. You usually never hear bad things about LeBron. And even like Dwayne Wade is trying to buy out from the Bulls potentially to come to the Cavaliers, reportedly. And he's played with him in Miami before, so obviously he wants to taste that success again. And he knows the only way in the East to do that is to go through LeBron. So, it's going to be another year of Warriors Cavs again.
I think so too. I don't see anybody competing with the Warriors out west as far as it comes to. And again, Cleveland's just LeBron. It could be
Yep.
the LeBron James. That's
Yep.
rename the team LeBron James.
Exactly. And Houston does have pretty good depth. They signed PJ Tucker,
Right.
Luke Richard, and Bob Mute. They have Clint Capella. They have the sixth man of the year, Eric Gordon. Who, by the way, Eric Gordon was rated an 80 on the new 2K18, which is the same as Markelle Fultz and Lonzo Ball, which I have a problem with. I think that's pretty ridiculous.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's another topic for another day. But yeah, Houston has a little bit better depth than just Chris Paul and James Harden.
Yeah.
And Mike D'Antoni, I think, like you said, great coach, especially on the offensive end of the ball. I think he's going to be able to figure it out. And Chris Paul is an underrated defender. He's such a good defender, and I think he's going to make James Harden a little bit more of a better defender, and that's going to help Houston out in the long run. Just because last year, I think the reason they weren't able to defeat the Spurs is that when James Harden kind of breaks down on offense, their defense usually isn't that great, and then they obviously traded for guys like Lou Williams, and then they signed Eric Gordon, who are, mainly just offensive specialist type guys. Same with Ryan Anderson, not that great of a defensive guy. So having Chris Paul there is going to help them out a lot.
Definitely. I definitely agree. Agree.
Anything else you want to say on the NBA offseason? Or I guess we've kind of already covered all of the major stuff.
Pretty much. Do you have a sleeper as far as somebody you think might not being talked about? I mean, Portland, I know that's not only a little bit of a biased pick, but I mean, a little bit of a homer pick. But I mean, anybody else? Sure. I personally am pretty high on Philadelphia. I think Philadelphia, if Embiid stays healthy, they could make again, it's the East, but they could make a 5 or 6 seed, I believe, and maybe win the first round game, which is saying a lot for where they were even 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah,
if they can turn around that quickly.
That'd be really impressive to see them make the playoffs. Yeah, I'm pretty high up in Philadelphia. I'm actually pretty high up on Orlando too, more than most people, just because of how much I like that Jonathan Simmons signing. Nikola Vucevic, he's also pretty good. Elfrid Payton can get you a triple-double.
Easily,
Yeah, which is always impressive to see from such a young point guard of his caliber. The only thing that I think is stopping Orlando is I think you guys rely way too much on Aaron Gordon, because maybe I don't watch enough, but from what I've seen out of Aaron Gordon, he's obviously very athletic and he can dunk the ball. But other than that, I don't think he provides enough for you guys.
His offense is still very developing. I mean, he's only like 22 years old or something like that, though. Yeah. He's very young, 22, 23, something like that. But he's very young. I don't know. I do think, like you said, I mean, I love Aaron Gordon. I think when we drafted him, I was super high on him. His offense hasn't necessarily developed as fast as I would have liked. I feel like he might be going down the same road of Dwight Howard. Dwight Howard was a big physical presence, could dunk the ball, but when it came to offensive moves and something, if he wasn't on the low post, he was nothing.
Right.
That was the thing. So
speaking of Dwight Howard, I think the Hornets might find themselves at also a 5th or 6th seed.
Yeah, that's interesting to me as well. Yeah.
I've always liked Kemba Walker ever since he was at Connecticut. But they didn't make the playoffs a season ago, and they kind of fell apart towards the end of the regular season. So it's going to be interesting to see if they'll be able to bounce back. Steve Clifford is underrated coach. I think he's a really good coach. And Kemba Walker is slowly starting to become one of the better point guards in the East.
Yeah.
His name has been thrown around there as far as being, top 10, top 15 in the league, which is a little bit of a stretch for some people. But this year he could prove it, especially with, if Dwight Howard revamps his career. Because 4 years ago, Dwight Howard was on the top of the world with Houston, and now he's been traded by the team that he thought was going to believe in him, the Atlanta Hawks.
Mm-hmm.
So
Atlanta just scrapped their team. So, but when you think about it, I mean, you think 4 teams in 6 years or something like that. He was Orlando, and then went to LA, and that didn't work out, and Houston and Atlanta, and now of course Charlotte. So it'll be interesting to see how that works out as far as that goes. But
he's lived in some great cities.
He has a lot of really good cities. He's seen the whole country pretty much.
Yeah, he's met every single woman too.
Yeah, probably.
How many baby mamas he has.
Oh yeah.
So let's move on. Wrapping up towards the end of the show. We also, one of the segments that we left out for this episode, we call it Open Line. It's kind of like 5 good minutes from PTI. We have someone on call with us talking about one of the main topics. We'll just have a very nice 5 to 10 minute conversation with them. They can discuss some of the segments with us. We love to get other people's input. So yeah, that's going to be one of the other segments that we have. Left it out for this show just because we want to get into the groove and whatnot. But expect it either next week or the week after that for somebody to hop onto a call with us. But our final segment of the day, which will be the final segment of every episode, leaving you with this. But it's going to be a 30-second quick take, whether it's going to be on sports or anything else. This is mine and Matthew's chance to just talk for 30 seconds about really anything we want, anything we think is impactful to sports or society. So Matthew, go ahead and leave you with this. Give me your very first one.
All right. Yeah. Talking about the NBA, we're going to close out. I'm going to close out with that. I think having split conferences is going to end up killing the league if they don't do something about it. I think Adam Silver needs to look into this and say, is this the best product as far as the NBA postseason goes? Everybody gets hyped up for the Western Conference playoffs, but nobody really gets hyped up for the East because it's always going to be Cleveland, and now it might always be Boston. I think Golden State is the franchise out west that, of course, is everybody's competing for, but West Coast basketball is just so much more fun to watch right now because that's where all the stars are. I think Adam Silver needs to do away with the split, maybe keep it in the regular season, but when it comes to seeding, take the best 16 teams, seed them, and let them go head-to-head. That could compete somebody. That way, you get good matchups year after year after year. You could have two Western Conference teams or a West versus East Conference team. No matter what, I think that is obviously going to be the best thing for NBA to further monetize and just become more valuable in the long run. So, Dayton, what about you, man? What are you going to leave us with today?
First of all, I totally agree with you. The only thing that's kind of restricting that, I think, is the travel that goes into it, because you could have a team like the Clippers play a team like the Celtics or the Knicks. I'm saying like in a few years.
Right.
Obviously, I don't think that'll happen. So they would have to travel there for a game series. But other than that, I think that's absolutely how it should be. But we should be thankful the NBA seeding is not nearly as bad as how the NHL is going. Their seeding is just ridiculous. So, but yeah, my final take just has to do with it's college football. Players being paid. I do think the amount of money the NCAA makes and the amount of restrictions that they put on players, the players should at least be making some amount of money. Like you're telling me they can't get some. I mean, granted, yes, free education is great, but most of the time the players don't even fulfill all 4 years of that education of that free school that they get, that full ride scholarship. Usually because they either enter the draft or they have an injury. Like once you're done playing football or basketball or whatever it may be, that scholarship is up. You're going to have to, like, good luck. You're going to have to find another way. And you can't work a job to get, I mean, we just saw this with the Central Florida kicker who had to pretty much scrap his YouTube channel because he wasn't allowed to make money off of him kicking footballs on the internet, which I found pretty ridiculous, kind of understandable, but I also found it pretty ridiculous. So I think that in a perfect world, players should be paid at least some amount of money to put it into their pockets just to make life easier. But we'll talk about that more, obviously, for more episodes because we are college football based. But yeah, I just wanted to get that out of the way, into the open for now, so that when I talk about it in the future, everybody kind of already knows my stance.
Yeah,
I got that out of the way.
Absolutely.
So, yeah,
that's a big thing that's going on right now. Obviously, there's a lot of hoops to have to jump through for both of those. Both the NBA splitting up the conferences, or breaking up the conferences, and then of course paying players in college. There's a lot of hoops to have to go through for both of those. But again, definitely those are our takes on that. But that's all the time we really have for today, Dayton. Thanks. Just want to thank everybody for tuning in, for giving us a listen. As we said before at the beginning of the show, our schedule is going to be we're recording during the week. It will come out on Friday, hopefully. Most weeks will come out on Friday, maybe potentially Saturday, with some scheduling stuff if we have to. You can give me or Dayton and I a follow on Twitter. Dayton is at Dayton_Brown_. And mine is at McFatty. That's MMCFATTY93. McFatty93. You can also follow the show on Twitter at HoopsandUPod. Again, all of that will be. You can follow me and Dayton, and we'll obviously post that up in our bio. As of right now, I think, Dayton, we're gonna just keep this on YouTube. And for now, so you can always find us on YouTube as well. Again, we'll have the link in our bios. On Twitter, I believe, and we're going to tweet it all out. So definitely give us a follow, give the show a follow on that. And if you like the show, subscribe to it on YouTube so you can be notified whenever a new episode comes out. But Dayton, I want to thank you so much for again jumping in on this with me. First
Of
episode.
course.
First episode jitters are out of the way, man. It's
Yes,
over. It's
I know. It was great. Love ever since you came on as a guest for Who Dat Dish, I knew having a podcast with you would be fantastic, and it already is. So super excited to start this journey with you. Yeah, thank you so much, everybody, for listening and subscribing to the channel. And yeah, be sure to follow us on Twitter because that's where most of the stuff will be promoted on that platform. So,
Absolutely,
yeah.
So hopefully, like I said, hopefully in a little bit it'll be put up on iTunes in the future. But again, right now it's on YouTube. So hit us up on Twitter for all of that. And yeah, so thanks again, Dayton, and we will see you guys next week.